of them that really shows that part of themselves. And that happens a lot even with regard to their kind of racial and cultural identity. So I think none of us are immune to those experiences, whether you're in the community or outside of the community. Sure.
Can I just, I wanted to make sure that Alfredo got an opportunity to answer that question, but I just want to say something real quick before we throw it over to him. When I hear the term gay agenda, I am responding to something very specific. And thank you, Jude, for bringing it up. I was in college in 1992 at a friend's dorm when she and a whole group of others, I was invited to this meeting, didn't know what it was, we're just, quote, hanging out. And she pulled out this DVD, which I later found came from Spring of Life Ministries, and I think they're located in California. And the DVD was entitled The Gay Agenda. And I sat down in this room with all of these people, and it's not like you can just get out and walk out the door, right? And felt attacked. And then as I've moved through these spaces, doing my work, working even in college spaces, corporate spaces, wherever, every time the term gay agenda has come up, it's meant negative slant, had a negative connotation or slant to it, meaning it comes from a religious understanding of what gay people are trying to do, or when used within the context of the LGBTQ community, it has had a cisgender homosexual white male perspective. But I'm really interested to hear what Alfredo has to say, because he's actually presented at some national conferences. And I just want to find out what you think and what your experience has been and where you are with that, if you don't mind.
But hold up, what did the DVD say? How you going to lead in with an anecdote and then not give us the juice?
Nope.
What was in it?
The DVD, the Gay Agenda DVD. Oh, it just basically,
what was it?
Well, it's what you could already imagine, how gay men were trying to corrupt children and basically indoctrinate them into homosexuality, how being homosexual was the disruption of, no, not the disruption, the destroying the family in an attack on family values because gay people can't have kids. Shout out to all my LGBTQ people who do. And it was vile. And I think the thing that was most interesting for me was sitting there and then having over half the room oh my goodness, yes, this is so important. And when you're in college, sometimes you feel like everything is a revelation. So again, this is 1992 and we're in these revelations, and I was quiet. And I remember someone turning to me and say, Tomas, you don't have anything to say about this? This is just really eye-opening. And I turned and said, well, my mother taught me if you have nothing nice to say, say nothing. So.
Dang. You and Jude trying to break my heart with these stories. I don't like it.
Well, you know what? Unfortunately, this is how we develop that LGBTQ armor, right? In order for us to truly be ourselves, we have to put up with a lot. So it means, do you sit down and cry every day? Or are you, like Jude said, cheeky about the gay agenda because we find humor in pain? That's the reality of our lives.
I also just want to add, again, just a little context on the other side. The reason why I was saying this is because I think there's a younger generation that doesn't allow the right to identify what the gay agenda is. I think there's a younger generation that doesn't allow other people to identify their definition for whatever they're doing going forward. I think we're with a younger crew, and I think that the reason why I had used Brockhampton is because they are younger. They're in 19, 20, it's a group of almost 13 of them. So I think that, just to add, I understand the pushback on gay agenda on the context of this is what the history of the word or the of the word is. I get that. But there's also a new generation of people who, and we've seen this even in the Black community, that don't have the context allowing people to identify where, they've grown up in an Obama type of atmosphere where they get to identify it. They get to have some type of power over how they're identified or how they're seen and represented.
Yeah. And let me just go back to you, Tomas, for a second. So I think that, so one of the things that I think one of the ways for me personally, and how power, big power, right, wins is always causing folks who are in marginalized positions to struggle with our humanity. And by that, I mean is the recognition of our pain and the validation of our pain. So what I made my comment about, I appreciate Jude sharing his experience, and if it's traumatic to you, then then it was traumatic. And at the very least, it was definitely a negative critical incident in your life. And that same experience for you, Tomas, I think it's communities, marginalized communities, power when we're able to connect around our pain. And oftentimes that is the piece that transcends across from us. And so, said differently, me and Ebony are both Black women, but how that shows up for us looks differently. But we certainly connect in our pain around how we are marginalized, dismissed, diminished, denigrated, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think the same thing is true for the LGBTQ plus community, is that there are these differences that exist and sub-agendas that Ebony mentioned, but there's also shared experiences around pain with regard to discrimination and invisibility, et cetera, et cetera. And so I don't ever want to be, there are certainly times in my life as a Black woman that the experience around pain and rage are way more tangible and palpable for me, and I have to work to move through them. But I also don't ever want to get to a place where I'm dismissive of that, and I want to just acknowledge that part.
Thank you for acknowledging that, but that wasn't in any way what I personally felt. I hope that wasn't what anyone else felt either. But Alfredo, talk to us. What do you feel about the gay agenda?
So I'm actually conflicted with the gay agenda because I come to it from two sides. Mm-hmm. So I think there's definitely a gay agenda. I think that exists. And so, the radical activist in me says, let's not shy away from it, right? Like, I think some people have been kind of apologetic about this idea that that the queers are organizing, right? That we want to take over the world. I say, let's take over the world. Let's make let's queer up this world, right? And what that means to me is that let's make this world about who you truly are, about your authentic self, right? I'm not saying I'm going to go around and convert everybody, because I don't want to do that. But it means that I'm going to fight for everybody to be their authentic self and to feel safe and seen, right? And that's my agenda. And to me, that is what the queer agenda should be. On the other hand, I think there is a queer agenda. And I think the problem is not so much that there is one, but who is dictating it, right? Who are the people at the table writing the bullet points on the agenda and saying these are the priorities? And of course, it's the people who have the money to sit at the table, right? It's the people who have the money to sit with the politicians and say, hey, I'm your biggest donor. One of the biggest examples that I saw this, and this is dangerous territory that I'm going to go into, but during Obama's administration, with the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell, right? I actually know of the people that were inside the White House basically negotiating with White House staff and saying, y'all need to repeal it, right? You need to take this down. And within that, there was a piece around trans military members serving, right? And the administration was really hesitant about that. The administration was saying, well, no, why don't we start with gay and lesbians? Let's do that as a first step, right? And then we'll get to trans people, right? And if it wasn't because there was a group of people literally chained and fenced to the outside fence of the White House, and this is during Obama's administration, which I know he was really friendly to the LGBT community, but if it wasn't because there were people, chained to the White House protesting, that conversation would have gone very differently. And even then, there were still concessions that were made, right? And so I think for me, that's the problem. It's not so much that there is an agenda, but who is at the table dictating that agenda? And you talked about the film, the Marsha P. Johnson film, and within it, they feature one of my all-time people I admire, one of my ancestors, which is Silvia Rivera, right? And we saw it with her. She was she was part of the movement. I argue she started Stonewall. And what happened once the people that had the money, that had the resources, that had the connections, once they had the mic and they were ready to set the agenda, they said, "Oh no, you're too radical. You're a little too much. People aren't ready for a trans person. So we're going to take over and we're going to dictate what the agenda is, right?" And I think since then that's been the problem. So for me, it's not so much that I don't advocate that we should have an agenda and that agenda exists. It's who is dictating that agenda. And my thing is, whether I want it or not, these people are going to keep saying what are the priorities, right? And so it's up to me to say, you know what, fine, let's say there's an agenda. Fine, I'll give into that piece, and I'm going to tell you that's not the right points on the agenda. We're going to flip them. So I think it exists. I think it's there. I think it is our responsibility, especially those of us who hold certain privileges within the community, right? Cis people, male, identified folk. I think it's up to us to really say, you know what, let's bring in queer women. Let's bring in specifically Black queer women, Black people, which are so overlooked within the LGBTQ community. So it's a struggle, but that's kind of where I'm at these days with the so-called agenda.
Thank you. So, Tama, were you going to say something?
No.
Or could I jump in and add just something that I'm hearing? Kind of just going back to what DJ Baker is saying, and then also Alfredo, I think it's interesting because we are talking about what does it mean to move forward with a gay agenda, and DJ Baker's talking about how it means something different for young people, and for some it's a space of self-empowerment and stuff. And so I think it's interesting, just even in this conversation when that term gets used, even if we're just talking about people that are very pro, are really reclaiming that and saying, yes, let's set an agenda and let's move this forward. Even when people are using that means really different things to different people. We're talking about the people who are currently, have the power and are trying to set the agenda. And then we're also talking about young radical activists who also have an idea of that agenda. And so I think that phrasing, that's true of any word, right? When we use a word, sometimes we move forward assuming that it means the same thing to everybody, but it could mean something actually really radically different. So, that was just something I was hearing as Alfredo was sharing and thinking about what DJ Baker was saying earlier. But
I love it. So I made I want to be always want to be respectful of folks' time. And when I had asked my guests to come in, I talked to them about an hour and a half commitment, and we've already run out of time. And I feel like this conversation is actually just really getting started. I am going to on the air right now say I hope that I can get you all, or maybe some subsection of you all, to join me again in future podcasts to keep the conversation going. I think this is we're just scratching the surface of so many important topics, and I am so grateful for everybody's willingness to just put themselves in it and be fully engaged and speak from your authentic selves. And this was what I had in mind, and I think it's even better than what I anticipated it being. So as we wrap up, I know that everybody kind of talked about their different professional endeavors that they had going on, some of your activist work. So if there are any organizations or work that you want to make sure we highlight here at Doopy Deeps, I want to give you the opportunity to kind of shout those out or highlight those. If there's any social media handles that you want to share with folks, I want to give everybody the opportunity to do that. So we'll go back around to the beginning, and I'll start with Ebony.
Thank you so much. I definitely think that this conversation was just getting started, and we could talk all day, actually. And I would love to come back. And I think this is a very important conversation to keep having.
Yes.
Especially as we all try to figure things out, because as we know, some things are clear and some things are just not clear. And I think that that's okay for us not to know. And I like just being in that space sometimes. It keeps me true to my hot mess. So I like being authentic in that way. So thank you both for that. And I appreciate it. I think this